Humans are the only known species to grow brain cells in a dish and make them play video games. It's part of a new industry called biocomputing, or wetware computing. When you grow neurons, they organize themselves into a network. Traditionally, this happens in a body, with sense organs like eyes to send electrical signals through the network, and muscles or something that can move in response to those signals. If you grow neurons outside a body, you can give them your own electrical input and use their output to control whatever you want. They might not be very good at it, but they could probably get better. Recent studies show these neural networks improving at playing Pong, balancing a pole, and driving a little car without hitting a wall. AI uses so-called artificial neural networks, but they're way simpler. ChatGPT works a lot like this AI from 1958, the perceptron. They pass information forward in orderly layers. Each unit waits patiently to get some inputs, combines them together, and sends them to the next unit like a conveyor belt. Learning is not part of that process. If you wanted to teach the perceptron to recognize letters, you have to show it a letter, let it run, compare its output with the letter you showed it, adjust the strength of some of its 4,000 connections, then run it again, check it again, adjust its connections again. Do that about 400 times and it can recognize any letter in the alphabet, if it's uppercase and right in the middle of the screen and in the right font. LLMs like ChatGPT are more like tricked-out perceptrons than real neural networks. Now they might do 1,000,000 steps in training for hundreds of billions of connections. And they have some other modules to optimize the whole operation, like so-called attention, another wishful metaphor. They're impressive, but they can't think any more than the perceptron could. They're not alive. Real neural networks are alive. They're always going, and they're connected in much more complex ways with loops and recursion, all kinds of electrical and chemical signals at different levels of scale in time and space. They can learn while they do stuff. And they don't just tweak the strength of their existing connections. They make new connections, get rid of old ones. They grow new receptors for specific neurotransmitter molecules. So how's that going to work for computing? And is it legal to use human brain cells to make computers? Is anything weird going to happen? Let's ask the pioneers. Dr. Fred Jordan is co-founder of Final Spark, the first company to make biological neural networks accessible online for researchers to interact with remotely. Dr. Evelina Curtis is a neuroscientist with Final Spark. We talk about why they went from artificial neurons to the real ones, how they grow them, their plan for a biological data center. You can see the prototype on their website, Live Neural Activity 24/7. Could biocomputing be more energy efficient than AI? What are the ethical guidelines for this research? You might be surprised. Could they create a conscious computer? And what do they say to philosophers who want to pause this research until we can answer that question? Here's Dr. Fred Jordan and Dr. Evelina Curtis of Final Spark.
Let's chat about the first big AI agent trend for 2026.
Agents for
Final Spark, we started in 2014. And when we started with things that we knew. And things that we knew is certainly not biology. We knew about mathematics and models and programming. These are the things that we knew. Okay, so we tried to build sophisticated neural networks based on artificial neural networks, but more sophisticated than the usual ones. But what happened is that after a few years of work, we had a few thousands of artificial neurons working together. But at the same time, we were consuming kilowatts of power. And then at this point, as an engineer, we had to sit down and say, well, come on, here we have a problem. Because in our brain, we have 100 billion of neurons. And now we need several kilowatts for running a few thousands of neurons. And for each kilowatt of server computation, we need twice this power for cooling. So it looked really like using the wrong tool for the task. And by a series of coincidences, and maybe also because we are sitting here in Switzerland, which is a bit the core of where the Brain project, financed by 1 billion by the EU, was launched. So there is some competence about neuroscience sitting here. And we were introduced by the idea that maybe instead of trying to simulating something, we could use the real thing. Which is funny enough, because in one way, 30 years ago, we went from biology to simulation, and now we're saying, okay, maybe let's come back the other way around, okay? And this is how it started. But it was, I tell you, it was a big move, because plunging into biology and starting to use Pipette for a programmer is certainly not an obvious, training.
So how do real biological neural networks differ from the artificial neural networks used in AI?
If you look at the complexity, as you mentioned, actually, of a single neuron compared to the usual models that we use, that's I cannot find words to explain how much the biological one is way, way more complex. Okay, and this is only talking about the neuron itself. There is also glial cells, which adds also a lot of complexity to this. Also, worth to mention the connectivity. You know that in artificial neural networks, recurrent networks is always a bit sketchy, I would say. For biological neural networks, you have cyclic and recurrent connections, and which is typically what we try to avoid actually in artificial neural networks. So these are the striking difference. And also, I would mention the speed. Okay, the speed of neurons, biological neurons, is quite slow actually, very, very slow compared to digital ones. So you have, in a nutshell, a way more sophisticated processing which is done by each neuron. It's spiking, and it's slower, and it's highly connected in all directions.
So currently AI is based on advanced statistic. Of course, it can be very fast. It can store a lot of information, and one of the main advantage of digital computers is the fact that they can process very quickly a lot of information, but usually it's all the same. It's based on, very simple operations. So from the human neurons, we could expect that they can process, they for sure, they encode the information in a different way, which can give opportunity to process this information more efficiently. So we believe they don't have to be better for speed or storage, but they could be better for complex information or for getting some synthesis or some creative ideas. This is actually a dream of many people who work with AI currently in the context of large language models. You have also some discussion about creativity. However, we know that this creativity is limited because even if the current AI systems can come up with some ideas we didn't think about before, they hugely depends on the data you input. So that's maybe not perfect creativity. So we believe that with living neurons, with the human brain, you could have real creativity.
Do you have any strategies or that you can talk about? I don't know how proprietary some of this is for guiding their development. Do you focus on any particular kinds of cell types, either all the different types of neurons or helper cells? You mentioned glial cells.
Yeah, well, that's the good thing. We are in a field where there is 40 years of state of the art.